That Sunday morning in Brentwood, the silence settled over the estate like a layer of thick dust. Not the peaceful quiet of a weekend, but the kind of stillness where even swallowing feels too loud. The black iron gate stayed shut. The security cameras swept slowly, like an unblinking eye. The December sun in Los Angeles was still gold, but thinner, colder, like someone had dragged the volume of the whole world down to zero. And that's why this story has to start here. Not with headlines, not with reports, but with the air inside that house before everything cracked. On December 14th, 2025, people would talk about the incident, the timing, the paperwork. But if you only look at the title, you miss the one thing that matters most, the temperature in that home before it broke. Because Rob Reiner was never a man built for silence. His whole life ran on sound. Laughter on screen, arguments that hit like thunder. The kind of presence where he walks into a room, and the room lights itself up. To the public, Rob was the gentle giant, silver beard, easy smile, the guy who could make you believe in love even if you didn't want to. But behind that gate, according to accounts that have circulated, a different film had been playing quietly for months. A darker cut no one wanted to watch. And worse, no one dared to stop. Picture it. A man who spent his life directing endings for other people. Setting the pace, the emotion, the twist, coming home and realizing he can't control even a single morning. The scary part wasn't that he lacked power. The scary part was that he loved too much. And because he loved too much, he kept believing that if he said the right thing, in the right tone, at the right moment, someone would come back. If you ask where the signs began, they didn't begin with police sirens. They began with things so small outsiders would shrug them off. Rob showing up less. Missed calls stacking up. Let's do it another time, stretching longer than it should. A man famous for holding court at dinner tables suddenly sitting quiet, eyes fixed like he was listening to a sound only he could hear. People close to him later said he looked like someone waiting for a bomb to go off. And the bomb wasn't out on the street. It was inside the house. And here's the part that makes this story suffocating. Rob wasn't the kind of parent who lets it slide to keep the peace. He believed in redemption. He believed in second chances. That belief made some of his best stories. In real life, it can become a trap. You stand on the tracks because you believe the train will somehow stop. Reportedly, in his final days, Rob started looking at his own home the way you look at a set that's about to collapse. Not because he feared the press, not because he feared losing his image, but because he feared his family was being pulled into a scene where no one could call cut. And when a man like Rob Reiner is afraid inside his own home, you understand something. The tragedy didn't arrive. It had already been there. So if you think this was a one-day shock, it wasn't. It was a long, slick downhill stretch, and the closer you get to the bottom, the harder it is to break. 3 days before the breaking point, according to the narrative that's been recounted, they tried something desperate. They tried to rebuild normal with a small gathering. And during that evening, under warm lights and polite wishes, Rob looked toward the living room like he'd heard the first crack of a wall. In that moment, he whispered something that makes you feel what he was doing with shaking hands, holding his entire world together. To understand why that whisper carried so much weight, you have to step back for a beat and remember who Rob was. He was born under a legendary shadow, the son of Carl Reiner, which sounds like a VIP pass into Hollywood, but it's also the kind of shadow that can crush anyone standing beneath it. A lot of people would shrink, play it safe, become good enough to not embarrass the family name. Rob didn't. He walked straight to center stage and made the audience look at him. And what separated him wasn't just fame. It was that he wanted to build stories. He built emotional rooms people could walk into and be allowed to believe. In friendship, in love, in the idea that humans can outgrow their worst selves. Look closely at his biggest films, and there's a motif running underneath. Connection saves lives. In Rob's world, no matter how dark it gets, there's always a bridge. But by 2025, the bridge builder was tired. Not the tired of running out of money or work, but the tired of using your heart as a tool for too long. At 78, his body slowed down. Heavier steps, aching knees, breath you have to measure. And if you ask what aged him fastest, in the logic of this story, it wasn't Hollywood. It was home. Because when you're Rob Reiner, you live inside an ecosystem of expectations. The public expects you to speak. Friends expect you to show up. The industry expects you to still be Rob. And family. Family expects you to be the anchor, the rhythm keeper, the person who can fix it. The cruelest expectations always land on a father's shoulders. Rob and Michelle Singer Reiner looked like the kind of couple that made people believe Hollywood still had magic. Married since 1989, together for decades, the kind of partnership people describe as understanding each other without speaking. Michelle was the anchor. Rob was the sail. They had 3 children. They built a fortress, not out of stone, but out of routines, meals, laughter, and the feeling that here is safe. But some things don't kick in the door from outside. They slip in through the smallest crack and slowly take over room by room. In this story, that shadow is often named as addiction. And to be clear, parts of what follows are based on retellings and unverified accounts, not courtroom conclusions. What's certain is the pattern families recognize. You wake up one day and you're not mom and dad anymore. You're a rapid response team. You're the sleep guard, the eye reader, the volume meter, the person who edits your own sentences in real time because one wrong word can trigger a storm. And the most painful part is that Rob didn't run from it. He faced it the most Rob Reiner way, believing that if you shine a light on the monster, it weakens. If the family holds hands hard enough, peace comes back. And there were years that looked like peace. Dinners without tension, calls you didn't dodge, moments where Rob softened into a gentle grandfather. Those years can lure you into the deadliest mistake, believing it's over. But addiction doesn't always charge. Sometimes it waits. Waits for you to get tired. Waits for you to relax. Waits for you to say, "We're fine." And then one slip, and it returns like it never left. In fall 2025, according to the accounts, that slip happened, and everything shifted from arguments to signals. Signals escalate on their own rhythm. Rob changed in ways outsiders couldn't name, but loved ones recognized instantly. Fewer callbacks, fewer appearances, less holding the room. His voice stayed warm, but got thinner, like he was saving air for a harder conversation waiting at home. And his eyes, that's what chilled people. The eyes of a man no longer living in the present, but living in the next minute. What happens next minute? Do you hear the door? Does a single sentence light the fuse? That's how a fortress becomes a watchtower. It doesn't collapse at once. It transforms slowly, until you look up and realize you've been living on alert for months. And the scariest part? Rob kept trying to keep the door open because he believed in connection, in redemption, in the idea that a person can turn around if there's still a thread tying them to the world. But that thread can also be the thing that keeps you standing there, past the point of safety. As December approached, the alarm rhythm got tighter, and they entered a week that, in hindsight, reads like a chain of last-ditch attempts, final patches on a script that wouldn't hold. Los Angeles had that strange kind of air then. The Santa Ana winds can make people edgy, sleepless, volatile. Maybe it was the wind, maybe it wasn't. The house was already tense. The wind just felt like it pulled one more wire, and the wire started to creak. Rob did what he always did in crisis. He tried to organize it. He called people. He searched for help. He reached into the network he'd built over a lifetime, not to save an image, but to save the breathing inside his house. Some accounts say he was trying to arrange another intervention, trying to find a place capable of handling the complexity, addiction, mental health crisis, unpredictable blow-ups. But again, that's as recounted, not confirmed in any official finding. The harder he tried to organize, the more brutal the truth became. This wasn't a set. On a set, you have schedules, crews, scripts, backup plans. At home, you have one thing: time. And time doesn't take direction. It just moves, carrying exhaustion with it, grinding patience down like stone. One story people tell is painfully ordinary. Rob went into his office, shut the door, didn't read scripts, didn't take calls, just stared at family photos for a long time, like he was trying to remember what normal felt like, just to prove it once existed. And from there, the house stopped running on routine. It ran on mood, voice volume, footsteps, doors, objects set down too hard. Outsiders hear that and think, so what? People living in it know that's the warning system. Because when one person in the house starts slipping, everyone learns to live by reflex. You wake up and listen first. Does the voice sound different today? You pass the hallway and check, door open or closed. You hold your phone and hesitate. If I call now, will it ignite? If I say this, will it be taken wrong? And somewhere along the line, you stop speaking honestly in your own home. You speak to keep the home standing. Rob and Michelle were pushed into the cruelest role. Parents turned gatekeepers, loving and afraid at the same time, wanting to hold on and needing to guard. And the sharpest pain is that they weren't just guarding their child from the world. They were guarding their child from himself. In those days, Nick was described as physically present around the house, but not really there, with energy that felt jagged, sharp-edged, unpredictable. Stone silent one moment, fire hot the next. That volatility turns a home into glass under your feet. Rob became haunted by a question he couldn't say out loud. If today turns bad, what do I do? Lock the door? Force him out? Call the police? For other people, those might be options. For Rob Reiner, it felt like a moral sentence. He'd built his life around compassion and second chances, and now that belief was pulling him closer to the edge than any enemy ever could. Because tragedies aren't dropped from the sky. They're stitched together out of all the days that were not that bad yet. The days you tell yourself it's okay. The days you exhale, and then the next morning you start again. Like pushing a boulder uphill. And right when things were tightest, they made a move that sounds irrational to outsiders, but is painfully familiar inside crisis homes. They tried to stage a normal night. Friday, December 12th, they held a small, early Hanukkah gathering. Not big, not flashy, just a few close people. The intent was simple: turn on light, bring laughter back, remind the house it used to be a house. But normal was paper thin. People who were there later described the vibe as strange. Everyone spoke softer. Even the laughter had a break on it. Like you checked reactions before you let it out. Nick was there, but he didn't blend in. He moved at the edges like a shadow with weight, and Rob watched him the way a bomb tech watches a wire, tracking the room's rhythm, flinching at the smallest lift in Nick's voice. Then came the cruelest moment, because it wasn't dramatic at all. No yelling, no explosion, just a small clack, a chair shifting, an object touching the table. The room went dead quiet for a fraction of a second. Then everyone forced the conversation back on, like nothing happened. But when a room full of adults jumps at a small sound, you know fear is driving the house. As guests started to leave, Rob walked a close friend to the door. The friend asked the simplest question. "Rob, are you okay? Be honest." Rob didn't answer right away. He looked back inside, toward Michelle, toward wherever Nick was in the shadow, then turned, back with eyes red in that long-term, sleep-deprived way. And he said it quietly, like he didn't want the house itself to hear. "I'm trying to keep the script from collapsing, but this time I don't know the ending." If you know Rob Reiner, that isn't just a sad line. It's a distress signal. The man lived by endings. And now he couldn't see the last scene of the only story that mattered. His own family. Sunday morning, December 14th, began with a few minutes of calm. The kind of calm that tricks you into thinking you've been spared. Rob got up early, made coffee in the kitchen that had hosted a lifetime of family mornings. The smell was so familiar it could lie to you, make you believe everything was normal. And that's what makes it terrifying. It feels like the quiet intro before the music snaps. According to circulating accounts and unverified retellings, the storm didn't begin with a single blast. It escalated. One reminder, one refusal, one no, something about medication, appointments, treatment. And by late morning, the confrontation was underway. No one publicly knows the first sentence, but the engine is clear. A desperate father trying to pull his child back to shore, and a son slipping so far he couldn't hear reason's rhythm anymore. If you place Rob in that moment, you can almost hear his instinct. He doesn't scream. He argues. He doesn't curse. He tries to explain. He uses that warm, persuasive voice that once convinced audiences to believe in love, to convince his child to believe in tomorrow. "Look at me. Look at me. I'm here." He steps forward because he believes if he can touch the soft spot, the whole thing can turn. And that's the tragedy. In that moment, words stop being a bridge. They hit a wall, collapsing from the inside. This wasn't a movie. There was no cut, no second take. And when the final boundary was crossed, violence erupted in the way official documents can only describe with cold terms. But you don't need graphic details to understand the most important thing about Rob in those final moments. His first reflex wasn't to run. It was to stand between. Michelle was there. The woman who'd been his anchor for more than 3 decades, and according to what's been recounted, when the danger surged, Rob's instinct was to put himself in the middle, old, aching, exhausted, and he still didn't move. Not to win, to hold. And the most brutal detail of all is who stood across from him. His own son. That's why this story isn't just violence. It's the collapse of something sacred. The split second when a father's heart gets torn in two. Survival pulling him away. Fatherhood pinning him in place. Then the silence returned. This time not the tense warning silence, but the silence of something finished. According to the retellings, early afternoon, a housekeeper arrived. Opened the door expecting something normal. TV sound, footsteps, a voice, and found a home that no longer felt like itself. A 911 call was made in panic, and minutes later Brentwood, so used to the quiet of wealth, lit up with red and blue, sirens and chaos that didn't belong there. Rob Reiner was confirmed gone. Michelle was rushed out in a desperate race. Nick was found there in a state people later described as empty, stunned, not resisting, not running, at least according to the circulating descriptions. By mid-afternoon, the news detonated. The internet convulsed. Hollywood froze. People couldn't believe a cultural constant could end like this. And the public's easiest questions arrived right on schedule. Why not hire security? Why let him stay at home? Why not lock the door? They sound rational, but they're the lazy kind of rational, because they ignore the hardest truth. There are doors you can lock that you may never open again for the rest of your life. Rob stayed because he was a father. He stayed because he believed in redemption. He stayed because he'd spent a lifetime making stories where humans survive what should break them. And in the one story that mattered most, he tried to do the same thing to the very end. He didn't get a happy ending, but he left a brutal truth behind. Sometimes love doesn't win, but it still chooses to stand in the way. If this story hit you in the chest, hit like and subscribe, because what you just heard isn't just an incident. It's a mirror about family, crisis, and the price of keeping the door open. And if you want the aftershock chapter, how the media shaped the narrative, how the public judged it, and what got left behind, comment one word. Part 2.